All right, everybody, here we are, another episode of American Baitworks Live. We are coming at you tonight with a guy that's been on here a few times, and I'm sure most everybody knows him. If you don't, Lenny Devos is with us. Lenny's from Canada. He lives in Kingston, right at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, right where it empties into, it actually is emptying Lake Ontario out and
Yes.
going downstream. But Lenny is I could sit here and give you accolades on Lenny forever about the accomplishments he's got, whether it's the Renegade Bass Tour and all the kind of stuff up there in Canada, the Thousand Islands Open. This guy, and not just smallmouth, but largemouth too. This guy really knows how to catch them. But Lenny, great to have you on the show again, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Trust me, I'd rather be in Florida talk about ice fishing, but it's all good.
So like I said, everybody knows, that you're one of the absolute best bass fishermen in Canada. But this is something I might not know a whole lot about. So do you get into ice fishing up there?
I do, and I used to be into it a lot more, but the older I get, the more I want to be where you are. But when I do get out, I do enjoy it, and it beats sitting on the couch, and you might as well try to catch some fish doing it. So.
No, I agree, and we've talked a little ice fishing the last couple of American Baitworks lives that we've had in the last few weeks. So now on the St. Lawrence River. There's not much ice fishing on there. Lake Ontario, not much ice fishing. Am I correct? I mean, I would imagine maybe the bays freeze.
Yeah, you're definitely right. You're definitely right saying not much, only because it is big body water. St. Lawrence River's got a lot of current, so it doesn't form a lot of ice. But there is opportunity to fish in, like you said, a lot of bays and tributaries off the main channel. And the fishing is actually very, very good. A huge pike. Big perch and a lot of big walleye caught as well. So
wow, that's pretty cool. So one thing that, and we talked a little bit about this the last couple of weeks. I've actually been ice fishing a few times in my life. The yellow perch or ring perch, whichever you want to call them, from underneath the ice, are probably some of, barring grouper and snook out of saltwater, those ring perch out of the ice are probably some of the absolute best eating fish that I have ever had. I mean, they're just absolutely delicious. And I know that the St. Lawrence River has a lot of those. So do the yellow perch, do they come up under the ice as soon as it forms, or is that more of a later in the year kind of deal?
I think it's all bait related. Once the bait moves up, the perch follow them. Because there's a lot of times you can fish for 3 or 4 days in a row and catch maybe a couple dozen 3-4 inchers, and you come in the next day and those 3 or 4 inchers turn to 12 to 15 inchers. So I think it's all bait related.
Right. So, so we're kind of getting off topic because I love the St. Lawrence River. I love Lake Ontario. We get talking about that. Not really that's off topic, but what are some of the places that is more normally the places that you guys do a lot of ice fishing up in that? I know you're right there on in Kingston where you live, and you're a firefighter, by the way, and we thank you for that. That's for helping everybody out. But it's more a little bit north of there, right? Like further going towards like Ottawa, maybe, or maybe even west.
For the ice fishing itself, you mean, or
more normal ice fishing type stuff?
Yes, definitely. Bay of Kenney, which was pretty much world-renowned walleye fishery. If anybody that fishes walleye through the ice, I'm pretty sure they've already heard of Bay of Kenney because that's where the tanks are. Like there's numbers and numbers of 10-plus pound walleye there. Lots of 13, 14 pounders. The odd 15, 16 caught.
Yeah.
There's some tanks in there.
How old do you have to get a 15-pound walleye out of the ice?
Usually a 10-inch auger hole is pretty much. An 8-inch you can do it, but it's pretty tight. You want to make sure you got a good hook in them, especially if there's lots of ice, because try to drag those big things through that hole. It's not easy. So
that's something that I was thinking about, and we talked, like I said, the last couple of weeks we've talked ice fishing. So, like I said, I've ice fished a few times. I've caught a lot of perch. One time we got on the bluegills really good. Man, they were delicious too. We caught a few crappie one time. So, but most of the stuff that I've caught through the ice, in my limited experience, has been panfish. We were talking catching lake trout, whitefish, those big pike. Like, how do you get the? Because obviously you can't get the fish to come up. If you only have a small hole, like getting him to get his head coming up like that. And my other thing too, so if the ice is like this deep, and like I said, I'm asking a question. If the ice is this deep and you have a hole, cylindrical hole coming down through it, and your line's coming through the hole, and then the fish goes like this or like this, your line's rubbing on the bottom of that ice. Is that something you gotta like? Put your rod tip down. Like, how does that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. All depends what I'm fishing for. I'll just use lake trout as an example. Those things, they fight probably better than they ever would during the summer through the ice, but they like dancing around the hole a lot. So like you said, your line's rubbing on that hole big time, and they'll do like 25 circles around the edge of your hole or bottom of the ice. It all depends how big they are and how spunky they are, but literally I'll just drop my rod tip right down the hole. If they're peel and drag
through, and
yeah,
can go whichever way. Yeah, it makes
exactly. I'll just drop the rod tip right down, let them do his thing, and wait till they tire out. And they dictate when you pull them through the hole. You don't force those things. It just doesn't happen.
Right. So like he's he's digging down or whatever, and then when he kind of turns, you just guide him whichever way to get it to the hole, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. You pretty much you got to tire them out a little bit longer through the ice than you would if you're in a boat where you have a net and all that kind of stuff, obviously. But once you get their head in the hole, it's not so bad because then they have nowhere to go.
Right. You got them kind of corralled in that cylinder then.
That's right.
Typically, you're ice fishing. Once again, typically you're running pretty light line, right? Like typically it's pretty clear water.
I again, all depends on what I'm fishing for. The lake trout, I don't give them as much credit, so I don't think you need as light a line. I think they're a little bit their stomach is bigger than their brain, so they just want to eat. So I don't generally go too light. I generally run like a 15-pound braid to 12 to 17 pound fluoro is kind of my go-to. And the baits that I'm using, I don't like using too light a line because I'm very erratic with the jigs for lake trout. I'm very, very aggressive with it. And with the light line, I find that the bait turns up on the line and gets hung up a lot, whereas the heavier fluorocarbon is a little stiffer, so it keeps that bait in check. It doesn't curl up near as much.
Cool. Well, let's hit a couple before we get going too much and start talking about baits and all that stuff. Let's hit a couple of comments, and we said we got Brian here from Rockledge down my way here. He says hey, and Richard saying hey. Here's one that jumped out at me. You were talking about the Bay of Quinte. Brian says Quinte Gold. I get that.
Gold. Yeah.
Here's another one I noticed. Tim says, hey, JT, come on up and I'll put you on a Western Maryland perch bite. So actually, that's the few times I've been ice fishing. That's where we did it in Western Maryland and Southern Pennsylvania. That's where I grew up in Western Maryland. So that's kind of interesting. And he says that's where Deep Creek Lake is where we caught all those big perch. That's the biggest lake in Western Maryland. That's where we caught all those yellow perch, and we're affinity for the yellow perch started. So that's pretty cool. Skip says every day on Lake Ontario is great ice fishing, and that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the broadcast when we first started talking. Was I don't think you guys are really out on Lake Ontario, but all the bays and surrounding stuff around it are really good. So
yeah. Now Lake Ontario, this year, I don't know if it'll freeze up because we've had such a mild year. But up until this year, there's a couple spots, and you're familiar with the areas. I won't tell you the specifics, but there's a couple key areas where the lake trout is just incredible. You're not going out to catch 8-10 fish a day. You might catch 2-3, but the average generally is like 20 to 25 pounds.
That's a good fish.
It's unbelievable, and talk about a fight. It's incredible.
Yeah, that's a good fish. I've heard that some of those lakes up there that let's just say some of the renegade bass tour, some of those lakes might be pretty good.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Justin says bigger holes are always better, less chance for mistakes.
absolutely.
I don't know anything about it, but anybody that wants to go bigger is better. I'm always on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Brandon says, "Get the net, boys." I hear you. I'm down with that.
Tough to do through the ice, though.
So John says, "That's why we drilled 3 10-inch holes and spud them out, Lenny."
Yeah, I fished with John many a times. When you're fishing those lake trout, yeah, we will. We'll make quite a big hole. But we always leave something in the hole when we leave, though, to identify it, because you don't want someone stepping in it. That's not good.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. Josh says, "Good evening from Loxahatchee. No ice here." No, I was out on Headwaters today, and no, there was no ice there either. I'll tell you what, for everything being relative, but down here in Palm Bay, it's been a little cool and easy. Now it's been warming up nice in the afternoon. Just been getting high 60s, maybe 70 degrees. But we've been having some cool. And once again, I know it's nothing like what you guys have, but everything being relative for our average temperature down here, we've had a pretty cool last couple of weeks. We had a couple of nights that were in the high 30s. We had just about every night until tonight has been somewhere in that mid to actually low to high 40s, somewhere in the 40s for the last couple of weeks. So our water temperature yesterday was it was in the mid 50s yesterday. Now it was up to 63, 64 this afternoon when I got off the water. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is.
Thing being relative,
yeah,
for here that's actually pretty cool. So
they must be getting ready to spawn then.
They are getting really close, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Tim says, "Is monofilament the line of choice?" Good question, Randy. You run a fluorocarbon, monofilament, you put in a braid to a leader. What are we doing here?
I generally don't use monofilament because I don't think I own any anymore. For that reason, but I don't think it'll make a huge difference, to be honest with you. I did fluorocarbon to monofilament, other than the stretcher, of course, but I'm only using short lengths of fluorocarbon anyway, so I don't think it'd make that whole much of a difference anyway. So
very, very rare do I ever use monofilament anymore myself. I've used fluorocarbon. One of the reasons that I really like fluorocarbon for anything I'm going to do that I don't want braid for, and I'm gonna sit here and tell everybody something right now that, and obviously this has nothing to do with sponsorships. Some company, nobody gives me line. I mean, I have in my career, people have given me line to use and talk about that. But fluorocarbon lasts so much longer
absolutely
than monofilament. It's unbelievable. And I'm going to tell everybody right here, just as God is my witness as I'm sitting here, now that I've just started doing all the TV stuff, whether it's MLF or my own fishing show, the fishing show with JT Kenney on MOTV, I'll be honest with you, I don't change my line as often. I'm just being serious. Like when I was tournament fishing, 2 or 3 days on a spool of line, I'm changing,
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like, it's not that big a dollar amount on the line all the time. I'm still fishing a lot, between the TV show and all my social media stuff. I'm still in the water a good bit, and I'm not changing my line every 3 days.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm leaving line on the spool for like 2 or 3 months. And guess what? It's fine. And I'm not going to say a brand or anything. I'm just telling you, fluorocarbon lasts as long as you don't get it all twisted out like your bait spinning or something. Dude, it's amazing. And you couldn't do that with monofilament to save your life.
No.
Leave monofilament on the spool that long. It's amazing. So I don't know. I guess maybe that's my little tip for the day. But seriously, you don't have to change fluorocarbon. Now I'm not talking about leaving it on there all year, but I'm just being don't be afraid to leave it on there for a few months. Like it's fine.
It's more of a mental thing to do during a tournament.
Yeah. Now, like I said, don't get me wrong. If your line's all twisted up and goobered up, like, yeah, you need to change it.
Yeah.
If it's still smooth and lays out there smooth when you cast it and it's not twisting and kinking and everything, it's fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine. Let's go down through here. Mark says, hey, JT from Clear Spring, Maryland. We're getting a bunch of Maryland guys in here tonight talking about ice fishing and the perch in Maryland, and now Clear Spring. Clear Spring is around Hancock, Maryland. It's kind of in the, if you were going east and west, kind of in the middle of the state. But I'm glad you stopped in. Jared says, hey. Robert Greenberg says, what? That's my boy. Christopher says, hey, Lenny and JT, the Bass in Ontario are not happy with this colder weather. Winter sucks, I understand. And for an Ontario bass man, trust me, I get it. Let's see. Jared also says, plans to come to Cumberland? I don't think so. He's probably talking about Lake Cumberland, I would assume, but maybe he's talking about Cumberland, Maryland. That's the city I was born in. Mervin says, what is your favorite fluorocarbon brand? If you ask me, I've used a bunch of different ones. I really like, and I'm not sponsored by any line company or anything, so I can be completely honest with everything. Berkeley 100% fluorocarbon is really good, and so are some of the Sunline lines are really good. I use them both now. I know Berkeley has a whole bunch of other like different fluorocarbons. I haven't used a bunch of those. The one that's 100%, Tri-League fluorocarbon 100%, I like it. And like I said, the Sunline, I've used a bunch of different Sunline ones. I really like the Shooter Sunline. It's kind of stiff, but it's good for like pitching and flipping type stuff. The Sunline Sniper was a really good all around, and it's reasonably priced.
Yeah.
And because the Berkeley one's reasonably, in my opinion, it's reasonably priced as well. But to me, and I'm just telling you my opinion, everybody's got their own opinion. I probably like Sunline Sniper and Berkeley 100% fluorocarbon would be the two ones that I normally pick. What about you, Lenny?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because remember I was talking about the heavier fluorocarbon being a little bit stiffer. When I need a bit of stiffness, I go to the 100%, the Berkeley 100% fluorocarbon because it does have a little bit more rigidity than the Sniper does. Sniper's pretty soft. So, when I'm sea rigging during the summer for smallmouth, I'll use the 100% fluorocarbon. And then when I'm jigging deep lake trout through the ice, it's 100% fluorocarbon. Just because it doesn't allow that bait to fold up on me.
Right. So Jason says, Lenny, do you flip jigs through the ice?
I don't, but
hey. I can see you going to like Dog Lake or something and like drilling a bunch of holes around one of those big milfoil beds.
Yeah.
And you're walking around just kind of daubing your jig down in each one of those holes and see what
Exactly. I just wouldn't be doing it for largemouth. It'd be for crappies.
Right.
Yeah.
Christopher says, do you guys use both 4 or 8 strand braid, and what is your favorite braid? Lenny, what do you use?
I'm the Power Pro Max Quattro. I kind of like that lately just because it's a bit thinner in diameter and it's holding up quite well. I just started using it last couple of years. And up to that, I was using whatchamacallit. Probably got some sitting around here. I got line everywhere. I'm drawing a blank. Go ahead.
I've been using both the Sunline, and I'll be honest with you, Sunline has came out with so many different braids that I've literally gotten confused on which one is which. Like there's so many options, and Like my personally, I don't think there needs to be that many options. But there's the one Sunline that's they make the two main braids. One of them's kind of rough, like the original Power Pro.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when you run your hand down the line, like like it's like
you hear it in the guides.
You hear it in the guides, and also when you're punching mats, lifting it up and down, you can feel it going zzz, zzz.
Sawing. It's sawing. Yeah,
that's not the one I like. I like the one that's slick,
smooth. Yeah.
But the slick one of the Sunline, I don't remember which brand it is. I got a box of it out in the garage, and I hate to be like this. I'm not trying to not tell you which one it is, but I like the smooth Sunline one. But in my opinion, man, it's tough to beat Spiderwire Ultracast. It's smooth, it's round. I don't like Spiderwire Stealth. Spiderwire Stealth is flat like your hand. And in my opinion, that being flat like that, when it's winding on the level wind on the spool, and then when you set the hook and pull really hard,
it
digs down in. Where a round braid doesn't dig down in the spool as easily. So when you get hung up and try to pull it out of the grass, you put the fish or whatever, it doesn't dig down in the spool. So I would probably say Spiderwire Ultracast is my favorite braid. Is it a four strand or an 8 strand? Christopher, I don't know. I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, me neither.
That's the two braids that I have out in my garage that I spool up on my rods. Let's see. Fred says, in your experience, how many days after a cold front blows through Florida do bass go back to their regular habits? Good question. It all depends on how quickly the warm-up is afterwards. And I'm going to, as a matter of fact, I'm going to do a whole seminar with Bass University on Saturday about this. But it's the trend of the water temperature. So cold front blows through. If it stays cool and the water temperature, say, is 70 and it goes to 60, and it stays at 60 for an extended period of time, it can take 4 to 5 days for them to get back into what they were doing before. It's almost like they have to reacclimate themselves to the drop in temperature. But once they get back down there, they'll do the same things they were doing. And a lot of times early in the Florida winter, December, late in the Florida winter, March, we'll get these one night of cold, but it'll be a hard north wind during the cold one night. So it does cool the water off because it stirs the water in the lakes. So it'll cool the water off like 10 or 12 degrees. But those early season and late season cold fronts, the next day it will be spun back around out of the south and be 80 degrees again. And it'll quickly warm that water back up. So it's almost like this shock that only lasts a day or two. And in 2 or 3 days, they're right back snapping again. So every cold front's not built the same, so it goes on the trend of the water. If it cools off and goes back up real quick, they recover quicker. If it cools off and stays cool for a while, but I've seen it take 5 or 6 days for them to start, what I'll say, quit acting the fool and start acting right again. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a while. So Jeff says that's a funny question about whether Lenny's flipping the holes or not. We were fishing yesterday for pike in shallow water, and all he wanted to do was flip jigs in the holes.
Yeah, that's right. It felt right. But
Christopher comes back and says, P-line TCB8. Any opinions on it? Also, Cigar Smackdown. I've never used the P-line. I've used P-line before, but I've never used that P-line. I've got some buddies that say the Cigar Smackdown's pretty good. I've never used it. How about you, Lenny?
No, I haven't either. No.
You know, I don't have.
Pretty religious on using what has proven itself to me, and I don't sway out of that. You go with what works and you stick with it. So
I agree. I agree. Wait, so let's talk a little bit about what we're talking about catching those big lake trout through the ice. What are some of the lures that you use to try to target those big guys?
well, I'm going to start with color with those. I just find 99% of the time, white is the deal with the Lakers. I don't know what it is. They just can't stand the white, and they got to eat it. But I'll use everything from soft plastics. I started using set the hook dart shad last year. With I always team it up with the Freedom Tackle football head, the swing head technology, and run the two. And I always try to go with something fairly heavy. So I'll just pair those two up. And another thing too, like the turn back shad from Freedom Tackle. It's very similar to, well, I shouldn't say it's very similar. It's if you're somewhat used to like a Rapala jig and wrap, this is Freedom Tackle. So I'm not going to say version. It's their own thing, but yeah, these things are incredible. The hookup on them is I'm trying to center it here.
We've had some guys say that that's not Rapala's, or it's not their version of the Rapala one. They actually took the Rapala one and made it a lot better. Supposedly, and I want your opinion on this while you're talking about the turnback shad. The amount of distance under the ice that you can cover with that thing, apparently, and I've never used it under the ice. I have thrown it, in the boat out, and when I was fishing for some spotted bass that were, going crazy on some really, really little bait, and I caught it. It was awesome. But some of the guys were saying how far that thing, when it turns back, and like if you give it kind of like a mended line through the hole in the ice, how far it'll like glide like way out. So you're covering more water under there than even, you get your little sonar puck down through your hole.
Yeah.
You're covering more water than you think you're just going straight down through that hole, but that turnback shad, actually every time you pull it up and then let it go, it'll just glide this way, and you pull it up and then it'll glide over this way.
It glides so much that it actually leaves the cone of the sonar. I don't see it on the sonar anymore, the flasher. And in 60, 70 feet of water, you're covering a pretty good squat on bottom. So that thing's drifting, that thing's motoring. It's gone. So, and it's fun when you see it come back and you see that great big mark right behind it to hang on.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah. Another great bait for them too is their blade bait.
Yes.
The vibration that thing puts off.
We've heard about that the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I tell you, there's a lot of people that haven't seen that, but I guarantee they should.
So, what's your opinion on this, Lenny? So, some of the guys were talking about when they were using the Freedom blade bait, they were taking the front hook off of it. Are you doing that too? Are you doing that modification, or are you leaving it alone?
I have done that only when I'm using the light line. When you use the heavier fluorocarbon, you don't have to, because it doesn't turn on that near as much because the line's a little bit stiffer. And then again, all depends how erratic you work it too.
I got you. So I could see like the when you're making a long cast with that vibrating bait, if it would roll up, that those front hooks might be inconvenience and get hung up more. But I would think if you're just dropping it down through the ice and just and then just letting it sashay back down and then sashay back down, you wouldn't think that those front hooks would roll up that much.
No, they're pretty good. They're pretty good that way. And again, all depends how aggressive you are with it. If you're really, really aggressive, chances are you're going to get hung up, but not that bad.
I'm
Straight
sure
up and down, like you said.
Right. I'm sure it all depends on what the bottom composition is too. And there's always a lot of factors that go into that. So
yeah, and I find the lake trout, I'm not fishing right on bottom anyways. A lot of times the fish are suspended. I'll get them 40, 50 feet of water over 100.
Yeah.
And that's where the big ones are anyways. That's where the monsters are.
Well, they're going to be wherever the bait is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all they care about. We got Ken on here. It says, JT, what beer are you drinking tonight? Miller Lite, the same as and then Ken also says, is that Devos? Well, of course it is. Who else would I be talking to in Kingston? I got some other buddies in Kingston too, but Lenny and I are always having a good time. Andrew says Seagar Smackdown is super smooth and castability is phenomenal. That's cool to hear because, like I said, and once again, I've heard a lot of people say a lot of good things about the Seagar Smackdown. I just have never used it. Fred says opinions on dark or green braid versus bright or say yellow braid. Does it make a difference to the fish? I just noticed after respooling with the dark braid, I wasn't seeing those stubble bites, and I could see with the faded braid. It makes me wonder if using bright yellow braid would help in detecting more bites. Well, I'll tell you this. So now I'm using a fluorocarbon leader, so I wouldn't want to tie a yellow or a lime green braid right to my bait, especially in a clear water situation. But on all my spinning rods, I use a bright green or a bright yellow braid. I do, and then I put like a 10 or 12 foot fluorocarbon leader on it. You know, whether I'm up on the St. Lawrence River or even if I'm fishing a spinning rod down here in Florida, I have bright colored braid so I can see it. I can see, if the line jumps or if the line starts moving, or I can see it. Like that dark colored braid, I can't see it. I can't tell. Like I hold my rod tip up to see if my line's still following, just to see if it got to the. Especially, sometimes you use a spinning rod and use the weightless lures. I can't see if it's still going down unless I have bright braid. But I think if you put a 10-foot fluorocarbon leader on it, the fish 10 feet away doesn't care if that braid's that bright or not. What do you do with that, Lenny?
Well, a lot of times it's based on what kind of day it is too. Like I'm not totally against using I use a lot of yellow braid on bodies of water where the water is really, really dirty. And you can't, like you said, you can't see that green line because the background blends in with the line too much. Or in a really heavy overcast day, I'll use that. Like if I'm flipping a jig, for instance, I'll throw the yellow line on a really heavy, like a pouring rain in a tournament or something like that. I can't, and yourself, a lot of times when you're flipping a jig, you don't feel the bite. You see the bite.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
With the yellow line, I get to see that line and the bite, and I'll tie my braid or jig right direct to my braid, but I'll also run about 4 feet of marker from the jig up, so it's actually black.
Right. And that's something that you said, but I want to bring up to some of the people. When you get really in tune, and I've had a couple of days in my life I've been like this, not a whole bunch, but I've had a few. But when you're really in tune, when you're flipping that jig in like that 6 to 8 foot of water, milfoil, clumps like you and I both love to fish when we're up north. I don't want to say that you sense the bite. You're so used to how long it takes your jig to get to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I know you know what I'm saying. I'm trying to reiterate this to all the people that are listening to us right now. But you get so in tune when you're dialed. I mean, when you're flat out dialed in. And I'm not counting in my head. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going 1,000, 2 1,000. You're watching. You pitch it up there into that hole. There's a bunch of hydraulic lumps. There's a hole in there. You pitch it down there, and it goes down through there. It goes to the bottom. You hop it once or twice, pull it out, and you're going right to the next hole. Hop it once or twice, going right to the next hole. But when you're dialed to like that depth, if that thing stops half of a second before it should have, you're pulling the trigger. Like you just know like the line didn't jump, it didn't do anything. It just stopped a half a second before it was supposed to. He's got it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and if you can't see that line, because I'm watching the line for that, as it's going down. Like I'm watching for that, but I think like subconsciously your mind, without even thinking about it, is timing that, whether you think you're doing it or not. And when it all of a sudden just, and it should have fell 8 inches further or 10 inches
Yeah.
further, I just clicked and hit him. Like, he's got it. And that's something that, and like I said, I know I've watched you fish. I know you get the same thing, but when you get dialed in like that, being able to watch that line is a pretty big deal. Now, I don't on my flipping rods and stuff, I don't actually go to the yellow line and color it with most of the time. Honestly, most of the braid I use, it gets faded really fast.
Yeah.
So when it's good and faded, it takes a couple trips, and I don't change my braid until I run it, until I've retied it so many times there's not enough on there to flip. But I do exactly what you do, and kind of a little trick that I'll tell everybody at home. If you buy one Sharpie, one black Sharpie, and I take a razor blade and cut a V into the point of that Sharpie, it's super easy then. And you just get a little tension on your rod and a little tension on the bait. And you can take that Sharpie that has that V in it and hit it right on your braid. Just go zip, zip, and then turn it and go zip, zip, and you're done.
Yep.
If you try to fiddle fark around with the point of that Sharpie, you'll sit there like you're Picasso trying to, paint the Sistine Chapel or something. Like it's going to take you that long. But if you just take that little marker head and just a little razor and just cut that little V in it, zoom, zoom, it's perfectly colored and it works very well. And in reality, I think your way is better, using that yellow braid and just always coloring it like that. I really do. And maybe when I run out of like the 300 yards full I got, which will be like 2 more years, when I run out of that, I may actually get the yellow. But once again, I do want to reiterate that on my spinning reels, I got 7 or 8 spinning reels. Every single one has either yellow or that bright, it's like chartreuse colored, line on there. So Fred says, oh, great explanation. Thanks. Cool, man. Glad we can help a little bit. Brian says, thoughts on Suffix 832. Suffix, I think, isn't that owned, or it's by Rapala? I'm pretty sure that's a Rapala line. I haven't thrown it. Could be the best braid out there. Might be the worst. Like I said, literally, I haven't thrown it. So
yeah, neither have
I. Let's see. Kane says, what is the best lure for pass in February on a cold lake? What do you think, Lane?
For pass.
I would say it's for bass.
For bass, yeah. Well, I don't fish for bass in February, so it might be more in your wheelhouse here.
So depending on what cold is cold, obviously I spent 22 years fishing a tour all over the country, and I've fished in everywhere from 33-degree water in February to 70-degree water in February. Used to be the gold standard when water was cold was either a lipless crankbait or a shaky head. Now, a vibrating jig, like say Freedom CFL would be a good one.
Yeah.
The vibrating jig in cold waters is coming out as a pretty good bait to throw. You're not necessarily, just like a lipless crankbait, you're not necessarily throwing out there and reeling it straight in like people think. And we do this a lot in Florida with a lipless crankbait. We call it worming it, where Lenny, you'll know this as the way you guys fish a blade bait.
Yeah.
But we call it worming a trap.
Yo-yo almost.
Loose term, yes, loose term. Yo-yo in a trap or worming a trap. Well, a lot of guys down here now will worm a chatterbait. Whether they're using Freedom CFL or a jackhammer or whatever they're using, they're worming that, and that's pretty hot too. I mean, there's a lot of big fish caught in cold fronts down here on a vibrating jig, and not just here, all over the country. Let's see. Fred says, "Love your TV show. When will season 2 start to air?" So honestly, I'm not supposed to tell everybody this, but I break a lot of rules anyway. So we filmed episode 1 yesterday. We did 2 different lakes in the same episode, just to put a little twist in it. It was pretty fun. John Cox was the guest on it, and that is one funny dude. Like, we laughed a lot. We said a lot of stupid stuff that was apparently pretty funny because the camera guys were laughing, the camera boat guy was laughing. I think it's going to be a pretty good episode. I would say within 3 or 4 weeks, it's probably going to drop. I don't know exactly when. That's kind of up to MOTV. We have certain times that I'm supposed to get I'm supposed to get the episodes to MOTV, and then whenever MOTV decides it's time to air it is when they do. But I would think it should be within less than a month, I would think. So, but man, Fred, I'm glad you like the show. We've had a ton of positive feedback on that. It's something that's really fun to do. This year we're going to do several episodes, not in the Palm Bay area. Last year, in 2020, we planned to do 6 in the Palm Bay area and 6 other places. With this whole COVID, I'm not going to get into that, but we ended up doing all of them in Palm Bay. This year we're not going to do that. So, but we had man, last year, and Lenny, I know you've seen some of them too. But I mean, the first year of the TV show, and we had 3 fish, double-digit fish, with an 11.3 and a 12.45. I mean, that's just what an amazing start to the fishing show. So we were pretty happy about all that. Let's get down through a couple more of these. Gary says, headed to Palm Bay at the end of February, full moon. Which lake should we focus? 5-day trip.
What I want to go to.
Right. So obviously Headwaters just opened. It's the biggest one. It's got the most cover. It's kind of like the crown jewel. But man, Stick Marsh is freaking bomb too, man. Like it's especially February, March, April. Stick Marsh is really, really good. Lenny, you caught a 10-pounder on Stick Marsh, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Pardon me?
2 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 years ago, and it was towards, I think it was the 3rd week of March.
3rd week of March, yep. So, but Stick Marsh is really good. Lake Lawton, Three Forks Marsh, Garcia, Kenansville, like they're all good. But if I just had to say, I would say Headwaters and Stick Marsh, and they're both on the same road. They're literally, the boat ramps are 2.5 miles apart. Like they're on the same road, Fellsmere Grade Road. I would probably concentrate on those 2, but yeah, I mean, full moon in February, as long as you don't get one of those nasty little cold fronts come through. But when you're getting towards the end of February here in Palm Bay, you're not out of the woods, Gary, but you're getting out of the woods. Like the further you go, I would say that the most cold fronts come through Palm Bay from the 2nd or 3rd week of December till the end of January. And then your chances, you could still hit a cold front, but your chances get slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. Once you get into March, getting fairly rare. End of March, you're out of the woods. You're not. But the spawn's over. What so many people don't realize, and yes, cold fronts screw up the bass fishing in Florida. Palm Bay's no exception. What people don't understand is we need the cold fronts to set up those phenomenal fishing days. Because what happens is The fish get knocked back when the cold front comes through. They get knocked back. They get, they hold up. Like they're like these waves are trying to move up. Move in the spawn. They don't really move up because so much of the lake's the same depth. They move towards the spawning areas. They get some heavy cover. They stage up, and then they go to the sparse grass areas and spawn. Well, what the cold fronts do is they hold up that process, but more fish continue to come to the heavy cover area where they're pre-spawn, where they're staging before they move onto the beds in the sparse grass. So you have a couple cold fronts come through, you get all these fish start balling up in these areas, and you can catch some of them. They're fairly hard to catch. The cold front's got the metabolism slowed down. The pressure change, headache. But then you get that warming trend. You know what I mean? So you've had like two cold fronts come through. All these fish they're piling up. They're backing up. They're backing up. Warming trend comes. They flush. They just flush out of there, and they all go to the sparse grass areas and all start spawning. And it's Katie bar the door. Like it's really good. So, and what's really taught me this isn't something I just knew. What's really taught me this is the last few years here in Palm Bay, we didn't hardly have any cold fronts at all. We've had more cold fronts this year already than we've had in the last 2 years. But last year, the fishing was just good all the time, in my opinion. It was never, and obviously in Palm Bay, the fishing's so good that my bar is pretty high. But we never had like those just 100 fish days. It was just 30 or 40 fish days every day. Like you never had that, like, because we never had those cold fronts to set them back, let a wave of spawners fall up, and then warm up and rush and rush the spawning area. So, and now this year we're having these cold fronts again. So I think, yes, they get knocked back, but it's almost like you have to take the punch in the face to get the reward at the end. You know what I mean? So the cold fronts, yes, they're bad, but they're not all that bad. So I rambled a little too much on that. Let me run through a couple more of these real quick. Josh is planning a trip going to Alabama, Tennessee this summer from South Florida for a do-it-yourself trip this summer. What lake do you recommend for smallmouth and largemouth mix? Anywhere on the Tennessee River. Pickwick is awesome. Gunnersville is really good. Not many smallmouth. Pickwick has a lot of smallmouth. They're all on Tennessee River. The whole Tennessee River is really good, except Kentucky and Barkley. Like Barkley's actually on the Cumberland River, but they're connected via a canal. Those Asian carpet got in there, and it's not pretty, and that's a whole other show, and we're not going to talk about that. If it was me, I'd go to Pickwick. I would go to Pickwick or Fort Loudon Tellico. Those are both really good too. Watts Bar is really good. Watts Bar has a lot of largemouth and smallmouth in it. Nickajack has a lot of largemouth and smallmouth in it. Like there's all of those, but I would say Watts Bar, Nickajack, or Pickwick. Pickwick probably being number one, but can't say for sure. Nick says, "What's up, guys?" Fred says, "With all the great fishing available in Florida, have you ever fished at Tenerife?" I have not. I've heard about it. I've not fished it, and it sounds like I would like to. Peter says, "What's typical pre-spawn cover if it's not depth? Just thick. Seriously, just thick. It could be thick reed heads. It could be thick hydrilla. Apparently, a lot of the Florida water management wants to spray hydrilla. That's a whole other story as well. I'm not going to talk about. Gary says, "Thank you. I usually drag a cold front with me wherever I go." I've got lots of people I know that come down from up north that say the same thing. Dawson says, "Hey JT, have you ever fished the Red River in Louisiana?" Absolutely, I have. I have a tournament there, but I've never been there myself. Any advice for the month of March there? Yes, be careful of all the damn stumps. I've never been any place that's got as many stumps as that place. But find the clear water. There's a lot of muddy water, but in March they'll be spawning. Try to go back in those oxbows as far as you can. You'll have to idle. You get back to the back of those oxbows, the water cleans up, and usually you can find them spawning back in there. Peter says, how thick is the ice on the back leg? I think that's for you, Lenny.
Yeah, well, I've only fished one back lake right now, and that's it. And we were there, it was probably 4.5 inches. That was about it.
Wow, that's really not that thick, is it? I mean, that's thick enough to be out on, but it's really
for sure.
But it's really thick, huh?
Usually this time of year, we're on those lakes, we're probably into 10 to 14 inches. So it's been very, very mild.
It's funny. Like I said, this is the coldest winter we've had in 3 years. Once again, everything being relative. I know everybody up north is going to say it's not cold, but it really is. This is the coolest temperatures we've had in about 3 years here in Florida. Not that cold, I get it, but you guys, obviously, if you only have 4 inches, and usually you have 10 to 14. I mean, obviously, it's been much milder up there. So
very little snow, everything here. It's actually, I don't mind it. I'm getting too old for this, so I don't mind it.
Don't worry, you'll be down here with me before too long.
I hope so.
Hunter says, have you fished Chickamauga lately? I actually haven't. Chickamauga is arguably one of the best lakes on the Tennessee River, and he's probably referencing that comment I made earlier, and I didn't include Chickamauga when I talked about Nickajack and Watts Bar and all those, but the guy specifically asked, he wanted to fish largemouth and smallmouth. And I know there are smallmouth in Chickamauga, but there's not as many smallmouth in Chickamauga as there are in Watts Bar and Nickajack, I would say for sure. Todd says, what would it take to get you on my boat and help figure out a 50-acre lake behind my house in Rockledge? It averages 12 to 15 feet deep, and I'm having problems figuring these fish out. Plenty of bass in it, just tough to locate them. I would say $1 million. No, I'm just kidding. No, hit me up in a PM on Facebook, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it, man. Yeah, definitely. And some of those little lakes like that, like a little 50-acre lake, dude, that like those places sometimes can be like the jewel piece. Like like you can get on them. Like they can be. I've fished some little lakes in this area that they were private little lakes people had that were just absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, Todd, just hit me in a PM, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it sometime. Mike King says, "Hey JT, have you ever fished the California Delta?" You know what? I haven't. And this year, Walt Reynolds, that is the guy that's over Frank Mackin, the guy that's over Scum Frog and Snag Fruit, and Walt Reynolds, the guy that's over Halo, and myself, we're all going to go out to the California Delta and fish the Snag Fruit tournament out there. And once again, I'm not going to get into it, but all this COVID crap kind of put the kibosh, if you will, on all that. Let's see. Terry says, I got too cold as well living in Wisconsin, now in Tennessee. Fish Old Hickory and Percy. Those are both two really good lakes too. They both have a lot of smallmouth, and Percy Priest right there outside of Nashville. Well, Old Hickory obviously is right outside Nashville too. It's in Henderson up there. But yeah, they have a lot of. Old Hickory doesn't have as many smallmouth as Percy Priest does, but they got a lot of largemouth in it too. Brett says, "Hey JT, headed to Kissimmee area for 5 days in mid-March. Can you recommend some lakes to concentrate on for biggins?" Yes, Headwaters, Stick Marsh. That did not take me very long at all. Headwaters and Stick Marsh would be the places to go. Flint says, JT, any experience on fishing Ross Barnett? That's in Jackson, Mississippi. And if so, any advice? I fished one event there. I had a decent event. It was a lot of shallow water fishing, and there was all kinds of stuff to throw at. There was lily pads, there was a lot of trees and stuff. There's some areas that had a lot of docks in it. But man, I just really don't have a whole lot of experience other than that one event. I know I got on them. Believe it or not, I was throwing a little crankbait and I think a little Alabama rig along the dam. There was a bunch of fish chasing really, really small bait along the dam. I think it was a fall event, if I'm not mistaken. And I had a pretty good event there, but yeah, it was just one of those deals where in the fall it didn't take that much weight. And I would say in the spring it probably take a lot more weight than that. But anyway, Lenny, well, we're kind of getting towards the end of our hour here, and as always, it always goes a lot faster than I would like it to go. But so, what do you have the next couple of weeks? What do you got going on? What ice fishing are you looking forward to? And I know you're probably not looking really forward to it. You said you'd rather be in the warmer weather, but I know you still love it. I know you do.
I do.
Yeah, I know. And so, what do you got going on? Is there some place that you were talking about the Bay of Quinte? Is there some? Are you going to do a trip there? Is there some place that you're really looking forward to? And what techniques do you think you're going to be using for that?
Definitely Bay of Quinte is probably right up there and one of my favorites, as well as Lake Ontario if it would ever tighten up. I don't think it's going to, but for those monster lake trout. But Bay of Quinte is always a lot of fun. I'd say there's probably only 20% of the bay that's normally fishable is fishable right now. It's crazy. So I'm hoping for some more ice up there in some of the deeper water area up there to catch some tanks. I don't eat a lot of fish, if any at all. So I'm looking for some monsters, and I'm hoping to get up there to do that a little bit. But
so let me ask you this. So we were talking about the turnback shad. But you had mentioned to me, like right before we went on air, about we were talking about some of the set the hook stuff. You were talking about the dart shad. You said and that's a big bait. Are you throwing that on a drop shot too, or are you just throwing it on that jig head you were showing?
Yeah, I throw it on the Freedom football head with the swing head. I throw it on that, and then I use that a lot for the lake trout because, I mean, the white is obviously is what they want. That thing's, it does a lot of action, and with the swing head technology, the action down below there, it's crazy. The lake trout can't stand it.
Right, it's gonna drift around a little bit. So, but do you ever do? Because some of the guys I've talked to in the last couple of weeks, they were talking about actually drop shotting through the ice. In particular for the whitefish too, which. You guys don't have much whitefish down your way, do you? That's more of a northern deal, or do you?
Well, we do have a few lakes around here that have the whitefish. I don't target them there as much. I'm more that walleye and panfish, like bluegill, perch, and crappies. But I'll drop shot for those, and I'll use a set the hook drifter or the junior crush worm or the little the little maggots that Peter makes. I got a couple bags here somewhere, like the tiny little. Hard to see them here, but they're just little little shrimp maggots is what they're called. It all depends the mood of the fish. Like I enjoy fishing a lot of panfish, especially the crappies and perch. They're a lot of fun, and usually when you get on a school, it's just nonstop. It's not like lake trout where you might be catching 2 a day. This is like 50, 60, 70 a day with the panfish, which is a lot of fun. So I don't like going ice fishing and catching nothing. So
I've found over the years, Lenny, that I really don't like fishing nearly as much as I like catching.
That's it. Exactly. That's right.
Well, that's a good point, Lenny. Well, we're going there. We're right here at the end of our hour. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody. We had a lot of people tonight. I appreciate everybody being in the comments. We're just coming in like crazy. But appreciate everybody coming. We will have another American Baitworks Live next week, Wednesday night, 6 o'clock. I'm not exactly sure who the guest is going to be, but obviously it's going to be somebody almost as entertaining as our buddy Lenny. So, thank everybody for coming. Lenny, especially thank you for being here, and we will see everybody next week.